So the question is, are you one of Schopenhauer's rare writers? Let's find out with this quote. So the first part is just him being direct and clear and extremely brutal on his three categories. And the second is a very stark imagery of what he means. Okay, let's begin. De nouveau, on peut dire qu'il y a trois sortes d'auteurs. There are three types of writers. En premier lieu, ceux qui écrivent sans penser. Those that write without thinking. Ils écrivent de mémoire par réminiscence ou même directement avec les livres d'autrui. They write from memory, through reminiscence, or directly from the books of others. Cette classe est la plus nombreuse. These are the most common. En second lieu, c'est qu'ils pensent tandis qu'ils écrivent. The second is the one that thinks while they're writing. Ils pensent en vue d'écrire. They think just so that they can write. Cas très fréquent, very frequent. En troisième lieu, c'est qui ont pensé avant de se mettre à l'œuvre. The third is the one that thought before getting to work. Ceux-ci n'écrivent que parce qu'ils ont pensé. Cas rare. These are the ones that only write because they've thought. A rare case. So let me explain before you decide which category you belong to. So the first is kind of self-explanatory. Someone who has no thought. And you can even say no original thought. And the difference between mémoire et réminiscence is that while they both bring to present something from the past, mémoire is more about sensations, so bodily experiences, and réminiscence is purely intelligible, of the spirit. So think of Plato's reminiscence. And the third example, they're not really that special because they haven't even thought for themselves. They're just recounting and transferring without processing anything. Thinking, that's what thinking is. Judging, discriminating, critiquing, making synthèse. So it's basically saying that this first group has done none of that, and they're not actually bringing anything new to the table. They're not creating anything. Yeah, they're basic. The second is the one that thinks as they're writing. So what's wrong with that, right? I'm writing, trying to put things together, I'm making my synthèse, I'm using thoughts. But the reason why this is very different from the third is that the third is already someone that has processed their thoughts, and all they have to do is put it down to paper. Like, okay, if I was to come up with an analogy, the first would be you are using someone else's recipe to make something. The second is that you're coming up with the recipe. The third is you already have the recipe and all you have to do is follow it, put it together, and serve up. So that was my quick analogy. Let's see what Schopenhauer has to say. L'écrivain de la seconde sorte qui entend pour penser qu'ils doivent écrire est comparable au chasseur qui part en chasse à l'aventure. Il est peu probable qu'il rapporte l'horloge. The second type are those who wait to think because they have to write. And they are comparable to hunters who go for the hunt for the adventure. It is very unlikely that they're going to bring home the bacon. Par contre, les productions de l'écrivain de la troisième sorte, la rare, ressembleront à une chasse au rabat, en vue de laquelle le gibier a été capturé et entassé à l'avance. So let me just translate this really quickly. So the difference is that for the second one, the game is already captured and corralled in advance. So the difference between the second one and the first one is that when you're on an adventure, you don't know what you're going to find. Maybe you'll find fowl, maybe you'll find game, maybe not. But this, you know that they're there. They're already in this enclosed space. And he goes on to say, pour déborder ensuite en masse serrée de son premier enclos dans un autre, où il ne peut pas échapper aux chaussures. So there's so much of them that it kind of overflows from one enclosed area to another, that they cannot escape the hunter. De sorte que celui-ci n'a plus qu'à viser et tirer. In a way that all that needs to be done is to aim and shoot. C'est-à-dire à déposer ses pensées sur le papier. Which is to say, to just lay out your thoughts on paper. It's like so violent but so poetic and so sharp and elegant. I just interrupted myself. Let me finish. C'est la chasse qui rapporte quelque chose. It is a hunt that brings something. I just thought that it was a very powerful and extreme image, obviously, because, you know, with hunting. I think what it did is that it personified thoughts as live game, and it's not just this like stagnant thing that lives in your head that doesn't really have a life of its own. It's so hard to like add to this because it's kind of self-explanatory and I don't want to be too circular about it. But I guess the idea is like, if you take the hunter example of, okay, I'm gonna go on a hunt because I like the adventure, and it's not so much about actually coming home with game. That's comparable of like, oh, I like the process of writing, it's enjoyable, but are you gonna end up with a piece that you're satisfied with? Probably not. And if you compare that with the third rare writer, if you're a hunter that has already done the work before, you know, what is the most efficient way to get what you want to get at the end? And the same as like, you know, if all your thoughts are laid out in front of you in this space in your vision, and all you have to do is select between them to put them down, it's so like invigorating, like this idea and this definition of what it means to write, or at least the definition of the process of writing. Because I definitely felt the difference with that for my first book compared to my second book, where it developed in my brain for 3 years, and then when I was in Berlin and I had a month to put it down onto paper, it was just the flow. I was in a cafe writing for 3 hours without this need to like pull together what it is that I'm trying to say. Oh, which leads me to one of the most beautiful quotes that I really adore from Schopenhauer. This is one that I actually quoted for my motivational letter to get into Sorbonne. So it goes like, de là, la première règle d'un bon style qui suffit presque à elle seule, c'est qu'on ait quelque chose à dire. So the first rule of good style, which is almost sufficient on its own, is that you have something to say. Bon. And yeah, I think like, you know, obviously from the get-go, again, you go like, what's wrong with coming back from memory? What's wrong with using your life experiences? And I think like that's what makes like really good writing, because if it's an experience that you're just sharing, cool, it's a vlog on paper. I don't know if you guys like had this experience of reading writers who literally feel like you're reading their blog, where they're just recounting life and facts, but they're not really doing works of fiction by combining the thoughts with something that is from the present. Like there's a mixture of temporality that makes text relatively more universal, which makes a text less particular. How about that? That's a little bit more right to say. So these three distinctions to me are very helpful in terms of, okay, what does non-thought look like, and what is wrong with being inspired by the past? What is wrong by taking ideas from other people? And the thing that he puts out so clearly, besides the fact that it gives being an inauthentic writer, being someone that hasn't actually processed the information, to the second part where it's like, okay, I am currently processing it, but I'm just grasping in the dark, to a certain type of maîtrise, a certain kind of mastery, where it's like you've already done the work and now all you have to do is to conserve these thoughts. And there's a thing about writing as being the way to conserve ideas, much more than to come up with them. So the question remains, are you one of Schopenhauer's rare writers? And if you're not, like, totally cool. I don't think, maybe the question is not even if you are a rare writer all the time. Maybe you can work towards being a rare writer. In what frequency are you a rare writer, or is that your process? Of course, he has a hierarchy of like which ones are better than others, but I think like just having a clear division between like the different processes is very helpful in understanding our own, well, process. And I hope you found that helpful. And if you did, please subscribe. And because I assume that you already did, because you're super nice and that you are a writer that's supposed to give us like some kind of connection, I am going to share with you one of my favorite quotes from this Écrivains et style, which I find really spicy but pertinent. Okay. Si c'est par exemple une impertinence d'interrompre les autres, ce n'est pas moins une de s'interrompre soi-même. If it is an impertinence to interrupt others, it is no less one to interrupt oneself. And that is his critique for people who break up their phrases. And I mean, it's just the use of the word impertinence, right? Like a disrespect. And the first reading, you're just like, haha, really funny, impertinence, obviously, you don't interrupt others, but then to interrupt oneself, but then it makes you really like question what it means to write a phrase and your respect for your own thoughts. So spicy but pertinent. I hope you're well. I hope you're warm if you're on this side of the hemisphere. I hope that you're cool on the other side of the hemisphere. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.